Hello, my name is Chris Pilgrim, and today I will be presenting my speech on gun control. So, as we know, gun control is a big topic of debate in America today. There are many different opinions, people saying that guns should be banned, others saying that because of our Constitution we are allowed to have certain types of firearms. So there are many different opinions out there, and there are many different factors that form opinions. Me personally, I grew up hunting with my dad and grandfather. They taught me how to use a gun, they taught me how to respect a gun, and certain rules that you followed, so you were always safe with a gun. Other people didn't have that, ability. They grew up with no guns in the house, they've never had the opportunity to shoot a firearm, and because of their lack of experience, they could potentially be afraid of firearms and have a negative opinion towards guns. So today I'm going to hopefully increase your knowledge and help you form a better opinion on the subject by talking about different things. First off, just simply knowing what the facts are. Are cities with higher gun control laws safer, or are they more dangerous? Second, how much government involvement should there be in gun control? During this topic, we will look at two countries that try to enforce gun control laws: Australia and their mandatory gun buyback program, and Germany pre-World War II with Hitler and the gun confiscations. And then we'll talk about whether or not either of those two will work in America today. And lastly, we'll talk about concealed carry licenses. Concealed carry licenses allow a person to conceal a weapon on their person. So we will talk about if these people who hold these licenses commit more crimes or less crimes, and whether or not they actually help stop or prevent crime. So let's look at a couple cities first with strict gun control laws that still have higher crime rates. We're going to start with Chicago, Illinois. According to NeighborhoodScout.com, Chicago has a crime rate of 44 per 1,000 people, one of the highest in the country. Chicago has high crime rates, we know, and they have a high population as well, so you would think that a high population would naturally equal more crime, and you're not wrong. But let's look at a little bit more specific crimes. ChicagoPolice.org recorded 2,388 shootings in 2018. Now, obviously, not all these shootings were mass shootings, and some of them potentially weren't even fatal. These are just instances where the police were called and an officer did respond. But still, that's a lot of shootings that were reported. So a high crime rate, a whole lot of shootings. So let's look at their gun laws. Let's see what they say. According to lawcenter.giffords.org, Illinois requires a FOID card, a firearm owner identification card. And you need this card to purchase a firearm or ammunition. And to gain this card, you need to pass a background check, meaning they're going to go look through your background, decide whether or not you are safe to own a firearm. And if you pass, then you can get the card to purchase a firearm. There is a waiting period imposed on purchases, meaning you pay for the firearm at the gun store, you wait a period of time before you actually receive the firearm. This is in place to, if there is somebody who has plans to commit a mass shooting and they do in fact pass a background check, hopefully the waiting period will help them give them time to kind of sort out their issues and get their mind right. That's the idea of it. And there's child access prevention laws, meaning that your firearms need to be stored in a safe space out of access of a 14-year-old or younger person. It's pretty strict gun laws, right? They're not like Texas or Idaho, but Chicago still has a high crime rate. But maybe Chicago's just kind of a unicorn, that's the only place it happens. But let's look at Baltimore, Baltimore, Maryland, going back to NeighborhoodScout.com, has a crime rate of 71 per 1,000 people, so significantly higher than Chicago. Now, not necessarily all these crimes are fatal gun crimes, but still, it's a lot of crime. BaltimoreCityMD.gov reported 339 cases of aggravated assault with a firearm, 642 cases of armed robbery, and a total of 4,826 violent crimes reported in 2018, with a high percentage of that being with firearms. So they have a lot of crime as well, the same as in Chicago. But what are their gun laws compared to Chicago's? In Maryland, you have to have a permit to own a firearm. The permits may issue by the state. So if the state sees you unfit as a firearm owner, you will not receive this permit. They have a magazine restriction limit of 10 rounds, and also on gunlaws101.com, it reaffirms the 10-round restriction, and it also has assault weapons bans or restrictions, meaning that your AR-15 or AK-47 looking guns are going to have a whole lot more restrictions than your bolt-action, more traditional hunting rifle styled guns. So as you can see, even with strict gun laws, these cities still have a high crime rate. And as we know, it doesn't matter what laws you do, crime is still going to happen because criminals do not follow any laws. So you have to take that into consideration as well. But let's look at a city that doesn't have the restrictions or laws that these other cities do. And what better place to go there to look at that than Texas? In Austin, Texas, according to NeighborhoodScout.com, has a crime rate of 37 per 1,000 people, so significantly lower than Baltimore and a couple points lower than Chicago. AustinTexas.gov reported 20 murder victims in 2018 and a total of 1,880 aggravated assault reports. It did not specify what percentage of that is firearms, but just going from Baltimore to Austin, there is a huge drop in aggravated assault. Texas also has one of the highest concealed carry populations, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, as that might have an effect on the lower aggravated assault reports. But right now, let's take a look at the gun laws in Texas. Texas does not have a waiting period, meaning you can walk into a gun store, pass the background check, and walk out with your firearm. There's no gun registration, meaning that when you purchase a gun, there's no record that goes to the government of who you are, what guns you own, and where you live. There's no assault weapons bans. You can purchase whatever firearm as long as it's within the NFA restrictions that are already in place. There's no magazine restrictions either, meaning if you want a full 30-round magazine for your AR-15, you can get that. There are a couple of requirements to purchase a gun, though. You have to have a valid identification, like a driver's license or something like that, and you have to pass a background check. There is nowhere you can go and buy a gun from a licensed dealer that you won't have to fill out a background check. So, Texas, they like guns a whole lot more. They have lower crime rates, lower murder rates. That might tell you something. But let's look at history for a couple examples. We're going to start in Australia and their gun buyback program. So they did this gun buyback program in response to the April 28, 1996 Port Arthur massacre, in which 35 people were killed. The government banned certain weapons, being semi-automatic rifles or shotguns, and also pump-action rifle or shotguns, which the government believed had a bigger or a easier time of delivering multiple rounds. If you don't know, a semi-automatic weapon will only fire every time you pull the trigger, and it only shoots one round per trigger pull. A pump-action firearm is only capable of shooting one round at a time as well. You do have to reload after every shot. They also tightened registration on their firearms in the country, so the government knew which people owned what firearms, and they also had safe storage laws, similar to Chicago, that you had to have your firearms in a safe, secure storage that was not easily accessible. So obviously, the law-abiding citizens in Australia did turn in their guns that were to be banned, and many citizens turned in their guns voluntarily that were not going to be banned, which people thought it would keep them safe, right? And obviously, in the places where the gun buyback was most effective, the crime rates or the murder rates did drop a little. But again, going back to the fact that criminals do not follow laws, their murder rates, or the murders did not stop. There are still murders going on in Australia. And this information comes from harvard.edu. So now let's talk about another way you can use government to have a bigger gun control impact is just outright confiscation. So let's talk about Germany. Before Hitler rose to power in Germany, the government wanted to tighten their gun control laws. So they had a tightened registration, meaning that the government now had records of the people, of the law-abiding citizens who did register their guns, what guns each family had, and where they lived. They also enacted red flag laws, meaning that if the government found a person to be unfit to own a firearm, or if they had a threat to another person, then the government could take away the firearms from that person. And then Hitler rose to power, so he, being in charge of the government, now had access to the registrations, knowing which family had what guns, where they lived, which helped him disarm his enemies. And also because of the red flag laws and him being in charge of the government, he could very easily manipulate the laws to take away guns from people. So it was legal to do so in that instance. And Hitler also did some gun laws of his own. He restricted Jews from working in firearms manufacturing companies. He enforced ammunition bans, and eventually he performed outright confiscations of firearms from his enemies. And if your enemies don't have any way to fight against you, then there is no opposition. The Nazi government was easily able to take over many of the countries simply because they couldn't fight back. There was no resistance to their tyranny. This is obviously a very dark time in our history, and I am in no way making light of anything that happened to the Jewish people at all, so please don't take it that way. I'm just explaining certain facts that happened and giving examples of why the government doesn't necessarily need to take a big role in gun control. So would either of these two examples work in America today? Going back to harvard.edu explains 3 reasons why it wouldn't work. The gun buybacks that have taken place in America have been too small of scale, and obviously there are going to be too many people that do not want to give up their firearms because it is in the Bill of Rights. It is the Second Amendment, and it is our right to own firearms. Example number 2 is the government does not have the power to force its citizens to give up guns. Obviously, the government is bound by the Constitution. And another thing is there's just too many gun stores. So if people did turn in their guns, it would be very easily for these law-abiding citizens to purchase a new firearm. It is estimated that there are also over 270 million civilian firearms in the United States. That's a lot of guns to try and take out of people's homes. BusinessInsider.com estimates that there are about 51,400 retail gun stores across the United States. So obviously there is a big access to these firearms, but you have to remember that in order to purchase these firearms, you do have to pass a background check. You do have to provide a valid ID. So it's not just like anybody off the street can go purchase a firearm from these gun stores. And that's just our right, because the Founding Fathers gave us that right in the Constitution. We, as citizens, have the right to keep and bear arms. And if that right is needed to protect against a tyrannical government like Germany was, then we are completely in the right to exercise that right. So neither one of these two examples of government gun control would work in the United States. It's just not going to work. But let's look at what guns do that is good. How much crime is stopped by guns, or even how much crime is completely averted by guns. Concealed carry licenses enable citizens to carry a gun concealed on their person to various parts of the country. Some states do not recognize other states' licenses as valid, but most states have trans laws that work with each other so that a state's concealed carry license will be valid in other states. So Informery.com estimates that there are at least 6.8 million licenses in the United States, and American Firearms Institute places their estimate to be over 120 million. So either number is a lot. To get one of these licenses, you do have to pass a background check as well and go in and take training courses and learn from professionals how to properly use your firearm, how to respect it, and make sure that you are always being safe with it. So if there are that many people who have concealed carry weapons on them, most of them carry every day, that's a lot of guns just walking around. So you would think that the crimes committed by these people would be a lot higher, right? It's actually wrong. According to the DailyWire.com, reported that concealed carry weapons holders actually commit less firearms violation than police. In fact, it's a seventh less. In Florida and Texas, the rate is actually 2.4 violations per 100,000 people. So that's very, very low. So there are these many millions of people with firearms in the United States. They don't commit a lot of crimes, but do they help stop crimes? Going back to DailyWire.com, in the last 15 years, as the number of permits have increased, the murder rate has actually decreased. And states that allow open carry actually have a 31% lower murder rate than states that do not. So as you can see, when people are taught how to respect, use, and handle firearms, they're not evil. They do not just kill people. They actually help stop crime and keep people safe. You just have to remember that gun laws are not going to stop crime. Criminals are always going to commit crimes because they don't care about the laws. Criminals are going to get their hands on illegal substances, whether or not they are illegal or not. So in conclusion, gun laws don't equal less crime. Government involvement does not always equal success. And guns in the hands of the right people are actually safer. So I hope you were able to gain some information to better form your opinions. And you just have to realize that guns are tools. They are inanimate objects, incapable of doing anything other than the holder's will. And I truly believe that as people are more educated and able to learn how to use firearms, then people will be less afraid of them, and the murder rates and mass shootings will also decrease. Thank you.